Hey guys, I'm a Forester here with another China video, this time about the China-US trade war. I just got back from Chongqing, China, where I attended a global wood trade conference. I met wood traders from all over the world: China, Russia, New Zealand, Australia, Uruguay, and Costa Rica, just to name a few. The conference was mainly about log and lumber trading with China, and I'm just going to give you a brief summary of the discussions that we had at the conference. Now, China is in an unfortunate situation where they depend on log and lumber supplies from other countries for over half of the wood that they consume. Russia, New Zealand, and the U.S. in that order are the top three suppliers of timber to China from around the globe. The trade war with the U.S. was a hot topic at the conference. President Trump had just announced his latest rounds of tariffs. Chinese speakers talked tough about trade with the U.S. One speaker basically said that China didn't need U.S. wood, that the trade war would just create opportunities for other countries to grow up their exports to China. 5 years ago, President Xi announced a One Belt, One Road strategic policy for connecting China's transportation systems with Russia and the EU, and movement of forest products is going to be one of the major users of rail, road, and river transportation systems, and much of the timber would come from Russia. A key U.S. speaker started his talk by trying to reassure the Chinese attendees that President Trump's influence would be short-lived and the tariff war would be abandoned. The speaker was obviously not a Trump supporter, and he didn't try to hide that fact, but I understood his goal of trying to calm the crowd. The Chinese attendees were very curious about President Trump, and at breaks, over lunch, and during the field trip, the most common question that I got was, "What do you think about President Trump?" The surprising thing was that most of the people who asked that question agreed with my assessment of President Trump. How would you describe the president? Well, the first descriptor that came to my mind was egomaniac. He thinks the world revolves around him. But Trump is not the only egomaniac in the world. Possibly every firstborn child has some of those tendencies. Now, I'm biased because I'm a middle child, but by the way, I have experience in working with egomaniacs, and somebody once told me a surefire way to get along with them is just keep them in the spotlight. Now, every once in a while the spotlight may move away from them, and then it's your job to take them and move them back into the spotlight. But how else besides egomaniac can Trump be described? It's not as easy as you might think to summarize Trump to a Chinese business person. Well, he loves to create chaos to somehow give himself the upper hand in negotiations. But the surprising thing was how the Chinese who asked the question also offered their own impressions of the president. They like that he says what he thinks. He's determined to get his message out in spite of the media. That was said to me by a Chinese businessman. He isn't PC or politically correct in how he deals with issues, and he often takes a common sense approach to dealing with issues like abortion, gun control, immigration, and climate change. I offered that President Trump's greatest contribution, in my opinion, may be his Supreme Court nominations and hopefully appointments. Trump's trade war is seen as disruptive, but then again, from my own perspective, trade between countries is complicated and China isn't guilt-free. South Carolina is where I live, and we've been impacted by China's unfair trade practices. In 2011, China banned all log exports from two states, South Carolina and Virginia, supposedly because of an endemic pest, the pinewood nematode. But there's two problems with that. One, hardwood logs don't harbor pinewood nematodes, so they shouldn't have been included in the ban. And two, pinewood nematodes exist in North Carolina, Georgia, and all other southeastern state pine trees. Pinewood nematodes don't recognize state boundaries. I've been working to resolve this issue with only marginal success, and I'm convinced that the primary reason for the ban was to eliminate competition for Chinese businessmen who came over, started a business, and shipped South Carolina logs to China with no problem. Meiguanxi, as they say. Now, is that fair? Absolutely not. Personally, I think the U.S. should take Russia's approach to timber trade. Russia's log exports peaked in 2006 and then they dramatically dropped after Russia put a hefty tariff on their logs. They increased their sawmilling capacity at the same time and then they traded in lumber instead of logs. This did a couple of things. It created jobs for their Russian citizens and it also traded in a higher valued commodity. The U.S. South has the timber resource to support increased sawmilling capacity. Now that would benefit our forest landowners as stumpage prices would increase and it would also create incentives for maintaining forest as working forest. In today's climate, domestic stumpage prices are at record lows and landowners are exporting logs just to try to increase their revenue. A disturbing remark by one of the conference speakers was that Trump's tariffs may actually come back to bite our own U.S. forest landowners. Think about it. If Chinese businesses refuse to pay more for our logs because they have access to logs elsewhere, then our forest landowners will have to reduce their stumpage prices to make up for the tariffs if they want to sell. Now, who saw that one coming? It was a good conference, although a very tiring trip. I've caught a cold, and maybe you can tell. I made some new connections with foresters from around the world. I'll include some pictures from the field trip at the end of this video. China is putting a lot of money into the One Belt, One Road strategic plan, and we visited a new port facility for handling logs, a log storage facility, and also a furniture factory. If you ever get a chance to visit China, I would highly recommend it. Y'all take care.